The more that I think we can be kind to each other and encourage and keep in mind that we were new to different things too. And this is just one of those new experiences that, we just have to all really encourage each other and teach in a way that isn't in your face, that, that we can talk about breastfeeding without it being divisive. But I also think it's pretty simple. I mean, this is how my children eat.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 143. Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. I am your host, Lori J. Eisenstadt, IBCLC, which stands for International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. I help moms with breastfeeding. We are well into the swing of Season 3, and I am having a blast here at All About Breastfeeding. Word is spreading about this podcast, and I'm thrilled to be on the way to reaching one of the goals I set out for when developing this show. I wanted to provide a forum for moms to hear other moms' journey into the world of mothering and breastfeeding. I wanted this show to make a difference and for moms to have a place they could come to where they felt supported and learned a lot about breastfeeding. The feedback I'm receiving assures me this is happening. One of the emails I received this week thanked me for helping her breastfeed her second baby. This mom told me of the many struggles she had with her first baby and how there was no one in her life that supported her as she tried to work through some early challenges. Buckling under the pressure and having a lack of confidence, she quit breastfeeding her 3-week-old. While she was determined to breastfeed her second baby, she worried about one of her major challenges: a lack of knowledge, and still a lack of support. She reached out to me on my free Facebook group, and I steered her in the direction of free resources I have on my website, allaboutbreastfeeding.biz, and I gave her links to specific podcasts that I knew would help her to get off to a good breastfeeding start. There were also handouts and checklists that she could download for free that would be helpful for her in the early weeks of breastfeeding. This mom also took advantage of the camaraderie of other moms in the Facebook group. She touched base with me this week and sent a picture of her beautiful 5-week-old son. He is happy and gaining and enjoying breastfeeding. She sent her appreciation to all the moms who have helped her be successful with breastfeeding this time around, and is one happy and confident new breastfeeding mom. I am forever grateful for the privilege of being your host of this show, and I am sending a virtual hug to Laura via this podcast. You too can have access to some of the information that I shared with Laura. Head over to allaboutmothering.com and you will see a link to fill out to get my ebook titled Breastfeeding Getting Started. I have to tell you, this podcasting thing is a really cool gig. I have the opportunity to hang out with some really cool people and get to know them better. We talk about their lives before kids, after kids, and some of my guests have started their own businesses, largely because they became a mom and wanted to try and find a way to continue working, being creative, making some money, while still being available to their children, than working away from home 50-plus hours affords us. You are going to enjoy my guest today as we have a fun and easygoing conversation about motherhood and breastfeeding and how life changes from having no kids to having one to having a second baby. These are the kind of conversations I just know that I would have loved listening to, particularly before my first baby was born, as his conversations give a bird's eye view of what life is like making the transition from working woman to becoming a mother. Sit back, relax, and enjoy hanging out with Katy and I today. Katy Widrick is a mom of two beautiful daughters, Audrey born in 2012 and Remy born in 2015. She lives and works in St. Petersburg, Florida, as an online marketing consultant and strategist, as well as a multimedia producer for a national brand. Katy, I welcome you to the All About Breastfeeding show. I'm so glad you're willing to take the time to spend with us and talk to us about your breastfeeding story.
Well, I am so pleased that you invited me, and I think resources like this are so important for new moms, for second-time moms who are relearning it, and also just for kind of encouraging the community of not just women, but of everybody to understand what it takes to breastfeed children, some of the amazing things, some of the struggles. And I think just really having open, candid discussions about this is so important. So I appreciate what you're doing.
You're welcome. You actually bring up a couple of points that sometimes I forget to talk about, because this show is for breastfeeding moms and for professionals and for anybody else who wants to learn about breastfeeding. And that whole anyone else who wants to learn about breastfeeding, that is one of the reasons that I wanted to do this show for, because my hope is that a soon-to-be breastfeeding mom or an employee might give a show or two that's appropriate to employers about making breastfeeding, our place of employment breastfeeding friendly, about nursing in public, even to grandparents, because there's a lot of grandparents who, if they did not breastfeed and did not grow up in a generation where others around them breastfed, and now they have a daughter or a daughter-in-law who are breastfeeding, there's a lot that they just don't really understand and get. So my goal is to make the whole world globally breastfeeding friendly. And I know that there's some shows on this podcast that will speak to people other than, in addition to moms who are breastfeeding.
You're absolutely right. And, I think obviously when we become pregnant, when we become parents, our interest in this type of topic is just that much more keenly focused. But, I know when I was even just thinking about starting my family, or I had friends that were getting pregnant and having babies, I really wanted to make sure that I tried to understand what all of that meant and what my friends were going through. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing now that sort of breaks my heart when it comes to new moms, as you mentioned, I'm a mom of two and I'm still figuring it out, of course. But with new moms, I think there is still this feeling like it's supposed to be so natural, and we're supposed to birth these babies and immediately they come to our breast and everything is perfect. And being open and saying, sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's really not this great bonding experience. Sometimes, we want to quit. I think that the more that, again, women share that piece of it, the more their spouses can be supportive, the more their friends can be supportive and say, I didn't really understand that sometimes you can't come out to lunch with me at noon because you know that you have to pump, or you know that your baby's going to nurse, or your milk is still coming in. Thank you for helping me understand the perspective that you're going through. I just think the more that we talk about these things and don't hide them behind nursing covers and hide them behind closed doors, the more everybody understands. And I also think that I know that I sometimes did not give the benefit of the doubt to people in my community who maybe weren't moms, or, my father-in-law or grandparents. I think I thought, well, they don't want to hear about this. That's weird. I'm not going to talk to my father-in-law about nursing. I'm not going to talk to my male friend. It turned out they were some of the most supportive, encouraging people, because they so appreciated what we as women do for our babies. And of course, your partner is such an important piece. And I was very lucky to have a spouse who supported our breastfeeding journey in every way that he could. But, at some point, the mom is responsible for a lot of that work. And I just found that letting myself be a little bit vulnerable and talking to everybody, not just other moms and not just other women, was really helpful, because we need everybody on board. This is one of those things where it takes a village. The more people that understand how to be helpful, I think the easier it all is, because it's really hard.
Yeah, I appreciate many things that you said. And one of them is, you have two kids and your oldest is 5, but you're still saying, I'm still trying to figure it out. And so I think that is a very realistic statement for everybody to know that there's always that joke about they're not born with a manual. And I've always laughed about that, but it really is true. And even if we had a manual, it's not like our baby read that manual. So we're still trying to figure it out. And one of the other things that you brought up was, your father-in-law and other males and other people, the more they know about breastfeeding. Now, I can appreciate if they don't want to get into a very long, in-depth conversation, but simple things like understanding why a mom, when she's on the outside, doesn't just give her baby a bottle because she went shopping in the mall. Like, people don't understand that if you're exclusively breastfeeding your baby and you wanted to go to the mall that day and you're out a little bit longer and your baby wants to feed, why you can't just bring along a bottle of pumped milk.
Exactly.
Maybe you never even pumped before. So why you can't just bring a bottle and all of a sudden have your baby drink milk from a bottle, and why you still don't have to go anywhere and quietly pump to give yourself some relief. So even just understanding the mechanics of it will really help other people understand why breastfeeding moms make certain decisions that they might be very, judgmental about. And that's just one of many examples I have in my pocket.
That's exactly right. And just to kind of sum up what you're saying, I think I have always tried to be really open-minded, but it wasn't until I became a parent, a mom, a breastfeeding mom, and really understood some of the logistical, mechanical challenges of breastfeeding a baby, whether it's for a day or for years. I probably was not as supportive to people as I could have been. I thought I was, but I know that there were times when my friends I would say, can you meet me out for coffee? And they would say, oh, I can't, the baby has to nap, or I don't know that I was as understanding of that until I was in it myself. I try to be, as much as possible, to be really forgiving of people who maybe say things like, oh, well, what do you mean you can't? Or can't you just give them a bottle? I'm sure that there are people that are just stubborn and they have not opened their mind to it. But I would say for the majority of those people, they just don't know any better. It's not that I am trying to be a jerk or antisocial. It's not that I'm, saying this. I want to get out of the house. I would love to be flexible and take my kid. But, there are some things that make my life harder, and I need you to be there for me and understand. And I certainly have learned that the hard way, having done it now twice. And I think I am better equipped to help other breastfeeding moms that I probably was a little bit harder on my friends than I needed to be years ago.
You're exactly right. And I know I was that way. And I know for myself, it was probably 99% a lack of knowledge about it. And once in a while, some harsh judgment in my head about it. But really, it came from a lack of knowledge. And that's what I find happens with most people. And when I teach breastfeeding classes and the partners come, guys come, and they're like, wow, like I had no idea what was going on with this whole latch-on thing. And now I could see why sometimes moms cannot do it quickly or easily or smoothly in public, or why they might shy away from it, or why other people think certain things, or why she can't go for 6 hours without,
Exactly.
or why I might not be able to take the baby and feed the baby a bottle for a couple of feedings between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and just let her sleep. Now I understand there are consequences to that. So,
Exactly.
Which, you know what I mean? I look at them and I'm like, geez, I just didn't know. And I'm like, you know what? Until I did this breastfeeding thing, I didn't know either.
Exactly. And that's, I think you could say that about really any parenting experience and most life experiences. And, the more that I think we can be kind to each other and encourage and keep in mind that we were new to different things too. And this is just one of those new experiences that, we just have to all really encourage each other and teach in a way that isn't in your face, that, that we can talk about breastfeeding without it being divisive. But I also think it's pretty simple. I mean, this is how my children eat. I was very lucky in that it worked for us and we were able to manage it. I recognize that is not the case for every woman, and every experience is different. And I think trying to be as kind and understanding of those situations as possible too. I have this overriding feeling in my life, and it probably has come as a result of being a parent and needing to let things go. But, it's this idea of you do you. I'm going to do me. I'm going to do things the way that work for me and my family, that make me confident, that bring me joy. And it's not going to be the same life that you have, and it's not going to be the same set of decisions that you have. But if you can trust that I have my kids' best interest in mind and my best interest in mind, then you need to trust that the decisions I make are right for me. Your decisions are right for you. And as long as we're not encroaching on each other or, being jerk, I'm fine with a world where everybody does things differently.
Yeah, you said a bunch of things. I love the term "you do you."
I've learned that really helps across all life experiences and perspectives. You do you. I'm going to worry about me, and let's just be kind and supportive of each other.
So let's hear about you do you a little bit. Where I'd love to learn just a little bit of background about where you grew up and what life was like for you and the family you grew up in.
Sure. I was born in 1980, and I'm Katy with a Y, and I'm sure there are other Katys with a Y in this age group listening, because that was what I think all of their parents named us. I was one of 4 in just about every classroom that I ever went to. I was born the first child of 2. I have a younger brother who is 3 years younger than me, to 2 wonderful parents who are still married and are just the best grandparents ever. We moved around quite a bit when I was a kid. My father is in broadcast journalism, and that's a career path that I took as well for the start of my career. And so, I have a lot of memories about moving around and being in different schools. I have always been very, very close to my parents, and I think this is probably a perspective that a lot of women have. I was always close with my mother, but everything changed when I had my baby. Not only did I lean on her much more heavily for advice and wisdom and just to kind of cry on her shoulder, I think I also just retrospectively understood that for the 32 years before I became a parent, my mom had gone through every emotion that I was feeling right when my first daughter was born. And I still sort of think in awe that that's probably an experience every mother and daughter has. When a new baby is born, the daughter looks at the mother and says, "Oh, I get it now. I get everything that you were feeling and that you continue to feel." So that's kind of a long-winded explanation. I grew up mostly in New England and now live in St. Petersburg, Florida, about 10 minutes from the beach. So it's sort of a dream life. And as you said, I have my 2 beautiful girls with me.
And New England is beautiful, but it's cold. So now
very cold.
So now you're in a place where you have lots of sunshine. And I know part of the year gets a little chilly for you, especially probably some of the mornings. But by and large, it's much warmer than in the New England area.
Yes, I'm very happy. I own 2 sweaters, and if I can wear each of them once a year, then I'm happy. My parents live in coastal Maine. So not only is New England cold, but the part of New England where they live is very, very cold. And we try to get up there once a year, but in the summer. And even then, even in late July and early August, which is typically when we visit, we are in sweatshirts and boots and loving the break from the sunny weather, but very, very thankful to get back to it.
Yeah, I'm from Long Island, New York, and close to the water. So you got that. It's not just cold sometimes. It is like that icy, cold wind against your face that it's raw if you stay out in it long enough and you're not covered.
Yeah, it just took my now husband and I were living in Syracuse, New York after graduating college. And it just took one lake effect winter where, our cars were stalled and we were de-icing everything and we were miserable to start looking for jobs in Florida. And that's, we moved down here in 2004. For what we thought was just going to be a 2-year contract, and have not looked back and are not thinking of leaving anytime soon.
And I bet you your parents come and visit you.
Oh my goodness. Everybody comes to visit us, and that's one of the beautiful things about living in Florida. Our guest room is always open. We love having visitors, and we fully understand that while they are here to see us, they are just as excited about the beach and spending some time by the pool. And that's just fine with us.
Yeah, because that's what they dream about in between visits, the pool and the beach.
Exactly. And then having the 2 kids is just another hook. We get the grandparents down all the time, so they get Absolutely. The added benefit of spending the time with the kids.
Do you want to see me or do you want to see the grandkids?
Oh, I don't even ask anymore. I know they just want to see the grandkids.
So you said your father had a life in journalism. Is that something that you felt like you were going to be doing a career? Like when you were in your teens, did you know that you were going to go for a career in journalism?
Absolutely. I would say earlier than that. I don't really remember a time when I did not think I was going into journalism in some form or fashion. My father was an on-air anchor and reporter for most of my life. I grew up watching him do the news and be live, and I would see him on screen as, almost as often as I would see him in person. That was always my reality. I also grew up really loving to write. I loved sports. And by the time I got into high school, I was doing some local production, just for our kind of cable access station. But I was producing video stories and doing some on-air work and really fell in love with that. So much so that I ended up at Syracuse University, which is one of the top broadcast schools in the country. And I honestly thought I was going to be the next ESPN anchor. I thought I was going to go into sports journalism. I was going to be on air. And that was my passion. And thankfully, I think it worked out that fairly early on in my studies, I really understood that my skill and my passion was not to be on camera, but was to be the boss behind the scenes. And so I worked and still work in journalism, primarily in television and radio, but I'm a producer, which is a term that is not familiar to many people. They understand what a reporter is or an anchor, but the producer really is the boss of the show. It's the person that puts the stories in order, does the majority of the writing, is in charge of making sure that everything goes smoothly, and often when it does not go smoothly, is in charge of getting it back on track. I love that. I thrive on deadlines. I like breaking news. I like kind of a fast-paced day. And I'm also a news nerd. To this day, I'm just, the more headlines, the more news stories. I like to listen into political debates, and it doesn't matter what side I'm listening to. I like discourse and I like that conversation. So yeah, I followed him, and I think surprised all of us when I did not go into an on-air position, but it has served me very well and has sort of led to some interesting projects that have become their own businesses.
I mean, I think it's wonderful to be able to be exposed to many aspects of a career. It all doesn't have to be exactly like the one we think it's going to be, like the one that we're enamored with, that there are many careers that we could actually go, we can take various ways around it and not, so you don't have to be that person in the front, you can be the person behind the scenes.
Right. And, not to get too sappy, but especially with the wisdom of 30 some years, I look back and I really credit my mom for making me understand that I could do this. I mean, my mom was a theater major, is still active in community theater, always had a real passion. In fact, she was a radio host. She was in journalism just like my father. And I think they made a decision when they were ready to start a family that, again, this is 1979, 1980. My mother was going to, put her career to the side, put pause on it, to have and raise children. And so she left the journalism and the broadcasting world and the theater world for quite a bit to have me, stayed home with me for a year, had my brother 3 years later, stayed home with him for a year, and has, for all of my memory, really, outside of obviously that year that she was home with me that I don't really remember, she worked out of the home. I would love to interview her sometime about this and really get her thoughts. But, my sense is that she did jobs that she liked and she worked for people that she enjoyed. And I think she was very happy. But the career path she took was absolutely in the spirit of raising her children, where my father worked in television where the hours were crazy. He worked an overnight shift, meaning that he was gone all night. My mom was the one that was home with us for bedtimes and bath times and dinners. And now seeing how much work that is, not just physically, but emotionally, to be the only one really, in charge of doing that. I'm just really grateful because she did all of that and still encouraged me to do and be everything that I wanted to be. And again, I don't think she would look back and say that she really missed out on anything, but she certainly made the choice to defer some of her own career dreams while my dad was able to go do them. He is and was a very active father. Don't get me wrong. My dad is one of my heroes. He was very hands-on with us. But, again, the reality is that just the day-to-day, family stuff certainly fell to my mom, and she made the choice to focus on that instead of making her career as big as it probably could have been.
I always say it's wonderful to have had the ability to have those choices and then to be able to jump back into her career in between kids. And then perhaps after your brother was born, well, we can talk about that a little bit, but what maybe she decided to do to go back to work full time and how long she stayed home. So it sounds like your mother really felt that it was important for her to be home with her baby. And I'm wondering, did you ever have the conversation with her if she breastfed you?
I did, and again, it's funny because right when I had my first daughter, we certainly talked quite a bit about breastfeeding and she was very helpful. But I also kind of don't remember a time when it wasn't something that we talked about, just like my kids are really too young to understand it, but I talked to them about their birthdays and what it was like to have them and, feeding them from my body. I've had that conversation with them since they were a day old. I think my mother had those kinds of conversations with my brother and me as well. I believe that I was breastfed for a year. I believe my brother was breastfed for a year. Again, I know she took a year off to be at home with us after each of our births. I know, and I think probably before attachment parenting and hands-on, that kind of phrase was something, I think my mom carried us in carriers, probably not as fancy as the ones that we use today. But, I think she was in some ways a pretty progressive mom in terms of that type of hands-on parenting approach.
I raised my kids around the time your mother raised you, and we didn't use the words co-sleeping and bed sharing and attachment parenting. But those of us who did that, we were just, I like that saying, we were just you being you, and that's what we did. And I didn't have a carrier. My carrier was my hips. So
exactly.
I had one baby holding high, another baby on a hip, and another one, by the time I had the third, the other one was holding my hand as we walked down the street. So that's how we did that whole baby wearing thing. I wish that I did have some beautiful wraps that I now, they're so prevalent nowadays that it just wasn't, I didn't know about it if they were around when I was a young mother. So it's just the way that it was. That was my hip was my carrier.
I know. And even in the 3 years between my kids, technology and the products have changed so much. And, my poor second daughter, I think, is like most second children in that everything she has is handed down from her older kid. And we didn't get a new crib, a new stroller. She got the ones that we had used before. But when I look and see what's on the market now, I'm pretty astounded at just in 3 years how cool some of the products have gotten.
We could go down a long road with this one, but I will just say one of my most favorite things is years ago I was handed down a swing and I was thrilled to get it. But the older swings, the bucket seats were not nearly as comfy and the handle to turn it on, the cranking sound that it made was one of those things like you might hear from New Year's. It was like very noisy. And if your baby did fall asleep and you wanted to crank it to keep her sleeping, then that noise would wake up. So you always had to choose which way you wanted to go. And now one of my most favorite things is when I walk into a parent's house and I see not only the swings that go forward and back, but now the ones that go side to side. But then the ultimate, the Cadillac one, is the ones that go up and down and around like an amusement park ride.
It looks like a spaceship. It's amazing.
I know. And I'm like, I want an adult one of those.
Oh my gosh. That sounds like a great idea for one of these product lines to make an adult, almost like a hammock that kind of just swings you gently. I like that idea.
Exactly. If anybody is listening and they are the creative, innovative people who are making products and patents, go for it because I'm first online.
I love it.
Today's show is being brought to you by allaboutbreastfeeding.biz. As an IBCLC, my expertise is in helping moms prepare for new motherhood, breastfeeding, and postpartum. I have several packages that I offer, and you can go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz and find out just exactly how I can be of service to you. While on that page, you will find the link to the Breastfeeding Mothers Group. This is an online group, and we begin meeting on Wednesday, February 15th. I like to keep the group small so we really get to know one another. There will only be 10 moms in a group, and we will meet for 8 weeks, and we talk about all things related to breastfeeding, and it's so easy for it to just get into new motherhood and postpartum. Don't hesitate to join because the next one won't be starting until May 10th, and I'm only accepting 10 moms in the group. All right, let's get back to the show where Katy tells us how she prepared for breastfeeding. Let's talk a little bit about your breastfeeding experience, and let's talk about Audrey, who was your firstborn. And while I know that you may have had some help from your mom, some talking about it from your mom, and maybe other adult women or peers, I'm interested to know also if there's anything that you did specifically to learn about breastfeeding before you had your baby. Things like, did you attend a breastfeeding moms group to look at other moms who are breastfeeding, ask questions? Did you go to a class, read books, videos? Is there anything that you felt that you did that was helpful for you?
Well, I did all of the above. I'm a type A for sure. So really with every aspect of getting pregnant, being pregnant, having a kid, having a second, I am one of those people that the more I read, the more calm and confident I feel. I don't like to go in blind to things. So yes, probably to an extreme, I tried to prepare. I think you can tell the end of the story is that there's no preparation that really gets you to know what it feels like and how it's going to work and what works for your individual baby. But I read The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding, and that was, I think, one of the most helpful books for me, just in terms of learning things like, what are the positions? How often should you nurse a baby? What are some of the things to look out for to, should it hurt? What's the difference between hurt and just discomfort? I had not been around many babies prior to having my own. And so I really didn't even have a lot of mom friends or being able to sit with a nursing mom and ask her questions. I didn't really have that community around me. So I read that book. I watched YouTube videos. I attended a breastfeeding mom support class while I was still pregnant. I think the most helpful thing that I did immediately after having my baby was I went to, I think they had lots of different names, but it was a baby bunch class where once a week, lunch was served. It was a room full of new nursing moms. It didn't matter if you had you could walk in without your shirt. You could walk in with a crying baby. There were 2 lactation specialists there that were able to help with things like bad latches or if your baby wasn't gaining weight. But mostly it was just a place where we could sit and we could talk about things. For me, I was very lucky, I would say, in that for both of my children, the first few days of breastfeeding were easy. And I should say easy, in air quotes, because I don't think breastfeeding is an easy thing, or it's certainly not as easy as it's made out to be before you have your own kid. But Audrey latched on immediately and she nursed well. My milk came in. She was gaining weight. Everything was great. And she really was a very strong nurser. I didn't really have many problems with her. What was a struggle for me were just first-time mom concerns. She was what my doctor told me is a happy spitter. She spit up after every nursing. We went through, I would change her outfit 5-6 times a day. She would nurse, she would smile, and then she would spit up all over me or all over my shoulder or on the wall. And, it did not matter. And so that's a silly example, but I was panicked about it. I thought, oh, she's vomiting. She's not getting enough. What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with my milk? Going to that group once a week and kind of saying does anybody else have this happen? And understanding that not only was it really common, but I got great advice from other moms. Sometimes the advice was just, yep, that's what happens. Just do the laundry and move on. She's fine. You're fine. Let it go. But there were also some really helpful things like, hey, maybe don't burp her right away. Give her a couple of minutes to kind of digest and then burp her. Or have you tried nursing with this hold? Or have you, tried this? And all of those little things, whether or not they were successful, it just really helped me feel like I wasn't alone. It was okay to be nervous, but I didn't need to panic, and that this is a pretty common thing.
And that's the beauty of a mom's group. To be able to walk away from that group feeling good because you know that you're not alone is just worth anything that it takes a mother to get to a group. If you feel like you just have to look good enough, your baby has to be well fed, all the stars need to be aligned. Don't wait for all that to happen. Just pick yourself up and go to a mother's group, because what you will get from that group will be so worth the effort it took you to get there. And you just said something that I said to myself and learned, and that I hear back from so many moms, is that just the support that you get, the mothers who are in the trenches, and just to know that you're not alone and that what you're going through is normal, that is like a gem. That's just worth everything.
And, the other thing it did, and just thinking about it now still kind of warms me a little bit, it gave me the confidence to leave my house with a newborn. Before I had a baby, I didn't understand why new moms didn't leave the house, And then you have this little person and you realize, well, you've got to pack the bag and you have to pack diapers and wipes and extra changes of clothes, and you have to have all these things, toys and whatever, and then you actually have to load them into the car seat and you have to time it so that they're awake, and it's just logistically, I remember thinking it's just so much easier to stay home, and that can be so isolating. And then I think having a place, so not only was I empowered and inspired to get out of the house, which was good for baby and really good for me, I was also going to a place where I didn't have to think about, are people going to look at me funny if the baby starts crying? Or what if I have to feed her? In those early weeks, having a place that I could go to where it was judgment free, it didn't matter if my hair was brushed or if I had spit up on my shoulder or if my baby had a diaper blowout, and all of those things happened at the Baby Bunch group. It didn't matter. I was in a pretty safe, protected place. And 8 weeks in, I definitely sort of felt like I had more of the mom thing down, and I felt a lot more confident. But man, in those first 8 weeks, I had no instincts. And funny, I remember getting so angry because everyone would say, well, trust your instincts, trust your instincts. And I just wanted to grab them by the shoulders and say, that's the problem. I don't have any instincts. And my instincts, I think, are crazy. My instincts are telling me that this baby who's spitting up is projectile vomiting and is ill. No, she was fine. So, I needed someone else to say, listen, your instincts are still kind of being built. Let me give you some wisdom from having been there, or from what we went through at this stage. For me, the whole trust your instincts phrase was not helpful. It made me feel worse because I knew my instincts were not good.
Yeah, I think, and I agree. I think that there's a bit of a balance there. And what I like to share with moms is, yes, to trust your instincts, but also if your instincts are telling you that you just don't know about this and you need to find out more information, trust those instincts. I think that there's a lot of good instincts we have about our baby cries and to hold them and cuddle them and try and find out and figure out what's wrong, different than what other people might tell us is to just let our baby cry and on their own and self-soothe, and that's a different mindset. So, because some moms do that, they're doing that. And then I tell them, I ask them, well, what do your instincts tell you? Well, my baby's crying, so I need to hold her. Like, yes, trust those instincts. But then you're talking about things like spitting up. I think, what new mother would not think that their baby is ill
Exactly.
if they're spitting up, and sometimes large volumes after each one, or even the hiccups for newborns. They could look so violent.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Our instincts are telling us, well, they're probably okay, but you can't quite trust that yet, so you need to ask. So trust your instincts, and there's a balance with that. The learning curve is still so huge. And what you said was, between day one and 8 weeks later, you were so much more prepared. You start to get to the point where you realize, I don't know everything, but you have this happy medium and this settledness that I'm not quite sure about this, but I'm not going to go into the stratosphere as far as anxiety, because my instincts are telling me it's probably okay. When I get home, I'll call the doctor, I'll call my mother, I'll do some reading, but we're probably okay. And you begin to accept the unfamiliarity of it all, and you begin to accept the constantly changing of it all, because once we get used to our babies hiccuping 5 and 6 and 7 weeks later, all of a sudden you realize they're no longer hiccuping. Just about the time you got used to to how they looked. And you also brought up a couple of other interesting things, is the need to stay home because we don't feel like we look good enough, or like we're the most smoothest with our baby. We may feel like we're on display and people are looking at us, or even not. We just worry, can we take care of our baby on the outside? And especially when it comes to breastfeeding, the concerns are, If I go out, where will I be when my baby needs to feed? Will I be able to comfortably latch my baby on? Will she be crying, for 5 minutes before I finally get her latched on? Will I have this huge vomit all over the place when I finally said yes to my friend to meet her at the coffee shop for coffee? And your mind is thinking, oh my goodness, my baby spits up. I'm going to be sitting in the coffee shop and she's going to be a mess and I'm going to be a mess. And, there are so many things, even down to, the whole logistics of getting ready. And I remember for me, probably one of my biggest initial fears was something nobody ever talked about and I certainly never thought about, but putting her in the car seat for the first time myself and making sure everything was just so, and then getting in the car and driving with my baby in the car. It's like, I thought, all no mothers really need to be in this bubble. Like, I can't be driving down the highway with a baby in the car. Like, all of the what ifs, so you start looking at all the things you do on a daily basis. You start looking at it with a different eye.
You're absolutely right. And it's funny enough, I know we're talking specifically about breastfeeding, but that to me has not changed. Now with a 4 and a 1-year-old, I'm still thinking about how am I going to feed the baby? Is she going to be fine? But I have this additional worry about, how am I going to be able to also watch my 4-year-old and make sure she's not running around being crazy, or, making sure that I am able to devote time to her while I'm taking care of the little one. And now I've got 2 kids in the backseat instead of 1. And, should I slow down? Obviously, it goes without saying that parenting is an incredible joy, but and a tremendous responsibility, and that it never is far from my head or my heart that everything I do is impacting them. I lose my temper like any mom. I get frustrated like any mom. I have bad moments. I try really hard to remember that in my baby's case, I say the nights are long, but the years are short. And to just remember how little time we have with these kids. And especially as a mom of daughters, I feel particularly called upon to be a good role model for them and teach them how to be strong women as they grow up.
Yeah, and I think raising kids, but with breastfeeding, it is a very loving thing to do. It's a labor of love. It's something we really want to do. And yet we can also say and totally acknowledge that it is a lot of work. And what I tell mothers who are sometimes thinking, gosh, there are some days or some nights, I just don't know if I could do this anymore. And then they feel guilty and bad themselves. And I talk to them a lot about, doing a regular job, a paid job, a career that they were doing. And if they loved it, hopefully most people do say yes. Some people are not really thrilled with their job. But I try to make that analogy that there are days that in this job that you go to every day that you love, there is still some days when you'd rather be doing anything but, and there is some parts of your job that you love that you're not necessarily really like to do. You're going through the motions. That's a part of your job that you don't really want to be doing, but as a whole, you love what you're doing. And it's the same thing with being a parent, with being a mother, with being a breastfeeding mother. It's not every single feeding that's going to be easy and convenient and that we're going to sit down and just enjoy and love, and to put it into that perspective, because we build everything up so high, and there's a long way to go on that pedestal when things aren't going as we think that they should be. And most of us, we just tend to go to that place of what's wrong with me, what's wrong with my baby, and why am I feeling this way? And sometimes we just build everything up so much, and it's too much to stay with the whole time and be there in that happy, loving moment all the time.
Absolutely.
Now you're breastfeeding your second baby, and like you said, there's a lot more going on. With our first baby, as tired as we are, we can sometimes still actually close our eyes when they close their eyes. And when you have a second baby, the first baby may not be napping anymore, may not have the same nap time. So I'm curious, with your second baby, Remy, is there any times that you've said to yourself, geez, I am so tired or so overwhelmed, I just don't know if I could do this anymore?
Yes, I have 2 kids, but the experiences I've had as their mom could not be any different. Just to give you a brief overview, when I had Audrey, my first daughter, I went back to work in an office at 12 weeks and she went into daycare. And so I went from exclusively breastfeeding to pumping during the day, sending bottles in. And that was kind of my experience with her. And she nursed until she was 22 months. But when I say nurse, she nursed with me in the morning and at night and on weekends, but she had expressed milk during the day, until she quit altogether. With Remy, she has been at home with me. I work from home now, and she's been at home with me from day one. And so she has had almost no bottles. I have pumped as little as I possibly can get away with. And the 2 kids also could not be more different. Audrey slept through the night starting at just a few weeks old and has always been my very easygoing, sensitive, quiet kid. Remy is my fireball. I mean, she's full of personality, but she's also not sleeping through the night at 13 months. She is a very, very clingy baby. She has always really been attached to me. And so, anything that I thought I knew after having one kid, I had to throw out the window because everything about having my second baby has been fresh and new and different and frustrating in its own way and rewarding in its own way. With Remy, I don't even think about breastfeeding as much. With Audrey, the idea of breastfeeding consumed my life, frankly, because I wanted the bond of actually having her to my breast as much and as long as possible because I, like so many working moms, struggled with being away from her during the day. I had to logistically think about, okay, I need to pump 3 times a day. When do I take those breaks? Where do I go? Where do I store my parts? Okay, come home, wash them, put away the milk. Hours of every day were spent thinking about breastfeeding. With Remy, I don't think about it very much because I basically just put her to my breast when she's hungry or fussy or, she's usually right at my feet. And so I think a lot less about it with her, even though I do it more often. I think the times that I have been frustrated have been because she has been a needier baby, just in terms of me. She has really never slept through the night. We've had a couple of moments where I thought, oh, this is it. And then she breaks a new tooth or she's sick and she needs me again. And I'm back to going in, 1 or 2 times a night. I have struggled certainly emotionally with just feeling like I'm always the one that has to be there. It's one of those double-edged swords because it's so rewarding and such a blessing to be the person that provides for her and the one she turns to. But that also means that I'm always on call. She will take a bottle, she's now past the age of 1. And so I have started to give her some organic cow's milk, and that has helped me a little bit in terms of getting more of a break. But yeah, I have certainly been more frustrated emotionally with feeling like, oh my gosh, like here it goes again. She's hungry again. I guess I'm the one that has to deal with that. Where with Audrey, that was never a stress for me.
It's funny when you say that. When I talk to moms about all the various aspects of breastfeeding and mothering and raising kids, it always brings up such warm, fuzzy memories or sometimes some scary memories. But when you were saying that, it was funny because when I was pregnant and as a very new mother with my first, I was consumed with one of the things was I could not wait until she said mommy the first time, or mom, mommy, or she acknowledged me with her words, because acknowledging me with her body language and her eyes lighting up and a big smile, she did that very early on, but I just couldn't wait to hear her say mommy. And then your kids started saying mommy, and then it's mommy, mommy, mommy,
Exactly.
mommy. And then you're like,
you think, why did I want this?
Why did I want that? And I thought that would be music to my ears, and then you get a little crazy with it. But then what was really music to my ears is when it did become that I was not their whole world, and it became daddy pick me up. Yes. Daddy do it. Daddy read to me. Daddy feed me. Dad. I was like, yes.
Oh, it's bittersweet. When Remy was, oh gosh, she was probably just coming up on her 1-year birthday, and we were traveling and visiting my parents in Maine, and I went away for 2 days to speak at a conference in New England. And, so I had pumped milk and I had done all this stuff, and, it was just I spent 2 days thinking, was this a mistake? She's going to need me. She's my clingy baby. My husband can't possibly handle it. And I came home and found out that everything was great. When I wasn't there and she had to rely on her dad and my parents and her sister, all of that, she was fine. And it was so bittersweet for me because it gave me the confidence to know that if I need to leave again, especially now that she's older, I can do that and I can have a little bit more freedom in terms of my schedule. But it was also a little hard to hear that maybe she doesn't need me as much as I thought she did. It's a weird thing to say because, it's again, the same reaction or the same event kind of triggered two opposite reactions, feeling so thankful that she was fine and healthy without me, but also wishing that maybe she still needed me as much as I thought she did.
Exactly. I would be like putting my hand on my hip and saying, do I want this or not? Am I happy with this or not? I can't quite make up my mind.
Exactly. And again, that hasn't changed. My older daughter has always been a daddy's girl. I came out of the womb that way. He was the first person she saw. I think maybe that's what it was. And my baby, as I mentioned, has always been attached to me. I mean, literally has to be held or carried or touching me at all times. She is now becoming more and more excited about seeing daddy walk in the door or asking for daddy to pick her up. And I'm so pleased for him because he, I think, felt like, well, I had this experience with the older one. Why doesn't the little one like me? Yes. So now he's understanding that no, especially because she was home with me, it was just a function of that first year. And now she's in love with daddy. And again, I love seeing their bond grow and strengthen, but I'm also kind of like, hey, wait, you're supposed to be mine. The first one was never mine. Now they're both just, all I hear is dad, 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 even when he's not in the room. And I laugh. My poor Audrey's old enough to understand it now. And she kind of rolls her eyes at me. But every time they go, daddy, this, that, I go, did daddy carry you in his body for 41 weeks? And did daddy feed you from his body for almost 2 years? And, and so I give them the whole sob story. And both of my births were unmedicated. And so I throw that in there too. And did daddy give birth to you at 24 hours of labor with no meds? Did he?
And keep doing that because I did that up until I still do that. And as they get older, their responses are different. Then you get kids who are teenagers just rolling their eyes at you.
Oh my gosh. I love it. Yeah. Even at 4, Audrey recognizes that this is kind of okay, here mom goes again. Let's just deal with it.
That's right. Here she goes again. I would love for you, Katy, to share some words, or just if you could pick like 1 or 2 words of wisdom that you would share with a new mother about postpartum.
Absolutely. And, this is, of course, a topic that I think we all really need to be patient with new moms because it's very different. I went through, I would say, postpartum anxiety with both of my children, but not to a level where I needed treatment or, additional support. It was just sort of the same feeling of overwhelm. And I know how much of a struggle that was for me. And so when I think that there are many moms, probably most moms, who suffer even worse anxiety and depression and really need additional treatment and support, I think my message to them is that if you feel like you are overwhelmed and struggling or underwater, you absolutely have to reach out to your medical provider, to a trusted girlfriend, to your mom, whoever it is. Don't stay silent about it. But I would say for me, especially with the experience of having 2 very different babies, the second one being the loud, fussy, high needs baby, I think I would just say it gets easier. Trust that it does. And if you need to take not just 1 day at a time, but 1 hour at a time, that needs to be your goal. There were a lot of days when Remy was in the first days of her birth, the first few weeks, where I just thought, how am I going to get to 5 o'clock when my husband comes home? Or how am I going to get to the end of the day? It just all felt so overwhelming. And I really did find that if I gave myself the grace to say, you know what, I can't think about that. That's too much of a commitment. What I'm going to think about is this hour, I'm going to feed my baby and I'm going to change her. And if that's all I accomplish, that's okay. I rushed back to work with Remy and I wish that I had taken some more downtime. The difference, I think, was that with Audrey, I was working full-time out of the office. And so I reported to a boss and I worked with a team. And when I had Remy, I had launched my own business. And so there was this internal, totally self-driven pressure to get back to clients and to go back to emails. And I think that if I had given myself more space and more time to just kind of be a mom and that was all for the first few weeks, I probably would have done a little bit better. I think that's probably the advice that I would give to new moms is you are going to think you can do things faster and better and more than you will actually be able to do. There are going to be lots of days when the biggest accomplishment you had was that you changed your baby's diaper. And that's okay.
And that's okay. We are all, so many of us will either have someone else telling us we have to get back to work, our employer, or that own internal pressure, thinking you have to get back to whatever it was your life was like before, hurry up and get right back to it. And it's only in hindsight that many of us look back and say, which is very common, what you're saying is, I wish I would have had more time, whether I chose to do it myself, someone else allowed me more time at home. That's really a very common sentiment, is that you just wish you had more time to just stop, smell the roses. And I call it like just taking a chill pill, because the rest of the world will be at your doorstep at 3 weeks, at 8 weeks, at 12 weeks.
Exactly.
It's all still going to be there. I'm curious to know if there is one thing that you felt that your husband either did that was helpful, or because the guys are not mind readers, is there one thing that you felt that you needed to actually tell your husband to do that you felt was helpful in that early weeks at home with the new baby?
Oh, it seems like a very little thing, but it was huge for me. And he cooked. I mean, he took care of feeding me and making sure that I had water. And again, going back to my last point about sometimes the only accomplishment you have in a day is that your baby is alive. I mean, I remember thinking like, okay, well, I didn't get work done. I didn't shower. She's only wearing a diaper. The house is a mess, but she's alive and she's doing okay. And so like, that's a check mark. And so that being such a little accomplishment often meant I didn't have time to make and eat my lunch or make and eat my dinner or get dinner together for my older daughter. Having my husband kind of just quickly and overtake some of those basic, like life-sustaining chores was huge. And of course, he was very hands-on with things like, especially when I had the second baby, he took my older daughter to school. He gave her baths where that was something that we always traded off. He would take her out to ride her bike while, the baby was fussy inside or needed to be nursed. And so that was a huge relief. But again, if you say, was there one thing, he always made sure that there was a big bottle of water or a big water bottle filled next to me. And he constantly brought me food and snacks, even when I didn't ask or I didn't know that I was hungry. I look back and I just think like, what a relief that was. I don't think I would have eaten. I know I would not have had the time or the energy or even remembered to fill my water bottle. It was just there.
And how important both of those things are. And I love how you said, well, I don't really know that this is a big thing, but, and I'm sitting here thinking, someone feeding you, making sure you're hydrated, that's huge with the capital Huge. That's huge.
Yeah. And I would love to ask him, I should ask him sometime if that was just something he picked up on his own. I was going to say, poor guy. I think that the more that you can involve your partner or your spouse in some of the classes that we mentioned, the better. So maybe he picked it up there and someone said, hey, listen, your job is to, keep her fed and hydrated. I think that in general, the best thing that a partner or a spouse can do is make sure that the mom is being taken care of too. Every mom, all of a sudden, all of your energy and focus turns on what's right for the baby. We are sleeping less. We are probably drinking more coffee. We are high stress. And we don't have the time to do things like take a bubble bath or take a walk or listen to a podcast or, like you said, close our eyes and take a nap. That whole idea of sleeping when the baby sleeps never worked for me. That was when I took my one shower a week, or when I, did some laundry because I was out of socks, or, that was when I did the other things.
I just got stuck on, you said bubble bath. I'm thinking bubble bath.
Well, I said it and I was like, man, when is the last time I took a bubble bath? It was probably 5 years ago. It was before kids. Just thinking about, what can I do? Not even the big things. I think the little things are the ones that fall by the wayside when you're a new mom. And even if it's just for the first 8 to 12 weeks, thinking, what can I do? Could I do the laundry? Could I, what are the things that she normally does that I could take off her hands? I think that is so important. And
that is, and it's great. And one of the things that I want women to hear also is that sometimes the partners, they're just not thinking of those things, and they rightfully so want to be on the couch with you, cuddling with the baby, want to be sleeping with you, and because they've been up at night too. And so sometimes they're just not thinking, they just don't know. What I want women all over to know is that if your partner is not doing for you things that you really need for them to do, they're not mind readers.
Exactly.
You need to tell them. And you may think it's obvious because you've told them when they came home, I haven't had anything to eat all day, that they're going to rush to the kitchen and get you something. They might say, oh, that's too bad. And honestly, just not really think. They may get you some water. They just may not be thinking along those terms because they also have a lot going on their mind, and they're looking at you and the baby, and they may be thinking that you need something else than what you're thinking. You wish that they would just initiate. So I tell all moms, you got to speak your mind. You got to tell your partners what it is that you need rather than sitting there thinking they should just know. Because it really is all about, a big part about making sure you get your needs met and including them in it. And sometimes they just don't know.
You are absolutely right.
Katy, tell us a little bit about your business. You said so with Remy, you had started working from home in your own business. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, and thank you for that opportunity. As I mentioned, I have been in broadcast journalism most of my career. Just because of the way technology has changed, a lot of what I do has moved from television and radio to needing to do, storytelling online and marketing and building websites and things like that. So I launched my own business when Remy was home with me after kind of doing it on the side as a little kind of smaller project for years. And so I now build websites, I build marketing strategies, I help with social media management, kind of a online marketing fixer is what I like to think of myself. I fix broken things, I help people grow. I absolutely love working with really everybody, but my sweet spot is working with female entrepreneurs and bloggers who want to be able to tell their stories and make some money and get bigger audiences. So
this is great because I work with a lot of women, and some of them are already working from home in their own business. Some realize that something that they never knew before. They totally anticipated returning to the workforce outside of their home. They have a baby and they realize that is not where my heart is anymore. And they start their own businesses. So you're someone who they could connect with to help, to help get a website going, to help, so you say you do all the social media stuff, like teaching people how to do all the Facebook stuff and social media and Twitter, or are you doing it for them?
A little bit of both. And what I think has been really great about owning and running my own business is that no client gets kind of a cookie cutter approach. I have a lot of people that come to me that have an established website or are on social media and want to do more with it, whether it's selling a product like an ebook or becoming known as a speaker. And so we look at what they're doing and try to come up with a plan to make it work better and faster. Recently, I think because so many people are starting to understand that if you have a story, if you have a voice, particularly new moms, they want to be able to share photos and videos and their insights. They come to me looking to launch a blog from scratch, and we do that too. So yeah, it's really been a joy. It was sort of serendipitous because I had just found out that I was pregnant with Remy when my husband found out that his job, he had an opportunity to move up in his company, but it meant moving away from Orlando, which is where we had lived for a decade. And so we said, you know what? Yep, we have got one kid. We've got one on the way. We don't know what our future holds, but this is something we feel called to do. So we packed everybody up. We moved 2 hours down the road. And because of that, I was able to continue doing some of the work for the company I'd previously worked full-time for, but really have some time and some mental space to be able to launch this business that I felt so passionate about. So Remy really, in many ways, has been with me from day one with the new business. I had just found out I was pregnant when all of this kind of came to a head. And so it's been a real pleasure to do it.
What's one of the things that you like the absolute most about the work that you do?
Oh, that is such a great question. Well, I think I'm in the minority of people who do online marketing at all in social media, in that, I like the tech stuff. I like figuring out why something is broken. I like coming up with a strategy. These are things that most of my clients come to me and they say, listen, I have this website. I love telling stories. I love taking pictures. I want to do more of that. But, the how to do all the technical stuff stresses me out. I love that. And so when I work with a client and they say something to me like, thank you, I don't really understand what you do, but I know that it's made my life better or it's made my business grow. That to me is really the biggest compliment, because it means that what I'm doing is effective and successful, but that I'm able to sort of unburden them from the things they don't like to do. As it turns out, I like to do it. So that has been really wonderful for me.
Oh, and to hear you say that, like, I am that person that I have knots in my stomach. I do not like the tech stuff. I do not want to have to learn how to fix a problem. I even sent you, I'll be a little transparent here. I sent you a link to join this conversation, and I sent the link from the wrong place. And I already, I'm starting this interview up with knots in my stomach already. I just hate the techie stuff. Give me almost everything else to do, but when you have that techie stuff, it just does not sit well with me.
And again, I think that has been the biggest thing for me in growing my business, is understanding that there is an audience just like you, of people who have great stories and are wonderful leaders. And I guess at the end of the day, I don't want people to not go after their dreams or tell their story because they're freaked out about how to do it or how to build the website or what happens if it breaks. And so if I can solve any piece of that, that always makes me feel like that's my calling in this community.
Katy, tell us how we could get in touch with you if we want you to help us free us from all of the stuff that we don't like, so we can get to the business of doing what we do like.
Thank you. My business website is makemediaover.com, makemediaover.com. And I also have a free newsletter. There's a sign up right there. There's no strings attached. Every week I send out what I hope are some helpful tips for people who are building websites, who have a website and want to grow it, who are into social media. I try to make it as fun and jargon-free as possible. While your listeners are online, I do have a parenting blog as well. It's bugchild.com. Which, funny enough, my mom's nickname for me was always Bugchild when I was growing up. And so I sort of named that in that spirit. And I have both of my kids' birth stories, their monthly recaps, sort of everything to do with breastfeeding and my experience is all on that website as well.
Yeah, I looked at that. It's fun. You have great pictures. But I am going to hop on your site and get onto your newsletter and hopefully benefit from some of the information and tips and tricks that you have, because I could always use more.
Oh, well, I so appreciate that. And that for me is one of the most fun things, is writing that each week. I don't really care if it ever, gets me a new client or makes any money. I just really have a deep joy for sharing that type of thing. And so I hope you find it helpful.
I'm sure I will. And Katy, I thank you so much. You've given me a lot of your time, your energy. Love talking to you about things related to breastfeeding, and sometimes we go a little bit off on fun little, I wouldn't even call them tangents, but interesting stories, because this show is about breastfeeding, but I also, have a little fun thing about that after we do get pregnant and do give birth and do have the baby and are breastfeeding, we're still all mothers who are going to be dealing with things that have to do with all things mothering and not just breastfeeding. So I think it's very helpful for moms who are tuning in, who are pregnant for the first time around, to realize what you've realized the second time around when you were so anxious the first time with breastfeeding, that there is a life in addition to and after breastfeeding and mothering our kids and all the joys and tribulations that go along with it. So I enjoyed going a little bit offbeat with some of our storytelling, and thrilled that you were comfortable doing so. So thank you so much.
Of course. And thank you again for the opportunity.
You're welcome.